process online. I would personally recommend it for anybody that doesn't want to have to go out and look for a lawyer. But yeah, I just did it online. So.
Is that what they use at Y Combinator?
I'm not sure if they actually use it, but that company I think did come out of Y Combinator. So they basically just do the manual process for you. You pay them and they mail things in. And everything.
Because at the end of the day, it's not that complicated, but you just have to know the process. I mean, we as founders, we don't have time to learn the process.
Exactly.
We have other things to do. How did you? So your mentor is an experienced entrepreneur. Dad is your friend, or you met him?
Yeah, he was actually the CEO of the previous company that I was at, the startup that I come out here to work for. So we just developed a good relationship, and he helped me along the way.
That's good.
He was just like, he was quirky.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, that's great.
All right. So
And you said the name is what, Quirky?
How do you?
Clerky.
How do you spell it?
Yeah, Clerky.
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 All right. Next question. So you incorporated. How did you decide which technology you're going to use to build your product? Mobile, web, gadget? How did you decide?
Well, on our end, is a little bit of trial and error. I think our CTO kind of put the main task on him. He, at the time, again, Ruby on Rails was fairly new, but it started picking up some momentum. So we tried a couple different languages. He built out some prototypes. We tested it in the wild. And then after he liked I forgot what we used first. It might have been a little bit of Python. But then what changed us to Ruby is we started thinking about hiring. Like, oh, again, our team, where we actually started the company, was in Mexico before we came to the U.S. and reincorporated. So we said we definitely need a language or a platform that's going to be scalable, but also the talent that we're going to be hiring will know. So we sort of factored in a combination of how we wanted to scale the business and the product, with also what do people, local developers know, so that hiring made sense. So those were two factors that played a lot into our deciding to build on Ruby on Rails.
And it was a web play.
And it was a web play, yeah, exactly. I mean, now the concept came up for us back in 2008. So we launched this particular product in 2011. So we have a lot of history before mobile became big. Now mobile is a big shift. So some of the newer things we're doing, we're actually doing mobile first. And again, it's just really thinking about trends, where our clients and potential users are headed. So that's how we're balancing the web and the mobile play.
So there are a lot of Ruby on Rails developers
In Mexico, yes.
Okay.
Why
Ruby on Rails? Why not PHP or Python?
Yeah, I think it's just there's a big Ruby community. One or two people who moved to Guadalajara, Mexico, had Ruby experience, just started doing meetups like this, and it just really spread like wildfire. So I think a lot of the younger engineers, they're learning Ruby online. It's fairly easy to learn and scales very quickly. So yeah, there's a big Ruby on Rails community.
Do you speak Spanish?
I do not, but my two co-founders do. And talking about risk, we all quit our corporate jobs. We ended up deciding to start the company in Mexico. Why? Because originally we're self-funding the company. My two co-founders were Mexican, so we knew that we could leverage some. It's going to be cheap for us to live there. We could hire some people early on and not spend too much. So I actually moved to Mexico for a year and a half, not knowing any Spanish. I took French. Again, one of my co-founders was my best friend in high school, so I knew him very well. And yeah, we made that plunge.
And you were surviving off ramen and spaghetti, right?
Yeah, I mean, we actually, funny enough, early days, for the first year and a half, we had this concept called community pasta. And the office was the house, right? We lived upstairs, the downstairs was the office, although we had employees. And we'd create this big bowl of pasta every day. That's how we survived and funded the company.
Yeah, so in the beginning, I was very on the fence whether we should go mobile or web, because you could go a lot faster building prototypes on the web. But certain things, we were convinced that we couldn't fully test on the web, so we decided to go mobile and stick with iPhone platform, mainly because it's a great platform to start out with, and it's just harder to test different devices for the Android, then we wanted to focusing on building a great experience on one platform, and we are still focusing on making it even better before we move on to Android. So that's how. And like Maxime, he is a Ruby on Rails expert, and so I was just given.
Did you decide mobile because you realized that your consumers are mobile?
That was one, definitely one factor. We wanted the application to be mobile so people can access whenever, wherever. And the push notification is a huge thing on starters. Like your friends get a notification after your workout, and they can send you high fives right after. So that was also a very big factor.
Yeah.
This is actually a funny question for me because this was part of what we wanted to solve in the beginning. It's like, what do you use to build products? So we actually experienced this problem ourselves going through the process of building LeanStack itself. So in the beginning, we actually started off with a Rails app. We were using Heroku, and we just thought part of it was, there's a lot of Rails developers out there, so when we finally do, hire and stuff, it'd be easier. The other part of it was like, we want to learn Rails. But at the end of the day, it was funny because we got out the alpha version and we built out all this cool stuff, and then we realized like nobody was using most of the stuff we built out. So it was pretty funny in the sense that, looking back, you could have just launched with a different product. So when we launched publicly, we actually just changed it. We just took the front end and put it on WordPress. So if you look at LeanStack now, it's actually WordPress. We'll probably bring back the Rails version at some point, but we just went with what people were actually using, and that was more of the content. It's like, tell me what I can use to build a product. Tell me what some of the best companies in the world are using. So even with this more minimal version, we've just had a lot of interest from people that are like, oh, this would have been, the CTO of Twilio, for instance, he said this would have been really helpful when we were building Twilio. So this was actually the core problem we wanted to solve, is like, what technology should you use and when is it appropriate? And we found ourselves needing it while we were building LeanStack. So we started off with too much technology, and then now we're at a point where we have a good sort of solution. And then, but part of what we want to do is help companies avoid this, right? You don't need to overbuild in the beginning.
And you bring up a great point. I mean, we have a website, but then we have a web application. So our web application is all Ruby on Rails. When we first built our website, we were building it ourselves off Ruby on Rails. But then we quickly realized that doesn't make sense, because with the website itself, you want to be able to change content, throw things up and spit it down. So we actually have our website on WordPress. And that was very good early on. You have to do a lot of design work to make it not look like it's WordPress. I mean, if you go to wepow.com, you never guess that's WordPress. So we have some strong people on there. But it really gives you great things, because WordPress is so good for SEO. It's so good for crawling your site. So very early on, we start showing up quickly on search engine just from using WordPress as the platform for our website.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's something we discovered later on, that it's amazing for SEO. Had we used Rails, it probably wouldn't, like if we had used Rails for the public version, we probably wouldn't have gotten so much traffic, because I guess just the way Rails is structured, and it's just easy to search the text. But going back to what you said, I think it's important to know what technology you need early on. Like, what is the minimum amount of effort you can put in to get a product? And had we thought about that, or thought about product in that sense in the beginning, we would have saved a lot of time. Where in the beginning, you usually want to build out the best experience possible, right? You want to use all the coolest tools, and you want to make it look perfect. But at the end of the day, you just need to test it out. So there are a lot of cool tools out there that we're now starting to help people piece together, where I think, your example, you could have actually used like a mobile HTML5 framework and gotten out your app really quick.
Yeah.
We just did a post on that. So it's interesting because you can learn from that, and you don't have to really go through sort of what we've gone through in a sense. And you can start at a different point and be smarter about it.
I think the WordPress tip is really valuable, because anyone still need to maintain, if you wanted to be a professional website, you can do the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript, implementation. But as far as backend, you still need to have backend. So today, while you guys use WordPress, you still maintain some sort of a backend system, right? Do you?
Well, again, for us, for just the pure website alone, WordPress is our backend. I mean, I can go in, I'm on the business side of the team, I can go and modify the text and the copy updates, which I love. We build plugins and widgets that make our website do what it needs to. Again, we have a separate web application that's fully Ruby on Rails. But again, the core website, WordPress has a nice CMS backend so that you can make updates and changes. And it
What do you mean when you say separate? There's the WordPress and there's the Ruby on Rails?
Yes, it's separate. So, I mean, when you want to log into our app, you click a button that's technically on the WordPress site, and then it takes you to the Ruby on Rails application.
Okay, that's what I understand. All right, cool. Next question is, what is your opinion about protecting IP, intellectual property, and did you take any steps in your company to protect your IP? Now, I should mention that part of incorporation is protecting your IP, because everybody are developing intellectual property outcomes in one group or an entity. So besides incorporation.
It's interesting you say that. I think for us, we probably didn't do quite enough early on. So we've gone through a number of name changes. Some of that was just us growing as a business. Some of that was we realized we couldn't get some international trademark that we really wanted for it. And it came back to bite us in the butt. As you start, early days, you don't quite have to worry about it the same way. But as you start accelerating and growing a brand, for us, selling to enterprise, selling to businesses, we have to create a brand very early on as a company. We went for a very edgy name early on, Wowzer. It's exciting. I think our first name was Ovia, online video interviewing application. Not very creative. We started getting feedback that sounded like a pharmaceutical company. So we worked really hard and came up with Wowzer, which is an awesome name. We loved it. But at the same time, I think if you're building something that has to really have legs on the branding side, take a little bit of time. Not saying wait months, weeks, but take a little bit of time to try and look online to see if there are trademarks that are similar to your name, because it really can come back to bite you in the butt. Now, there are different schools of thought here, right? If you're a no-name or very early-stage startup and you might be infringing a little bit of someone else's trademark, they're probably not going to care, right? And maybe when you start coming on their radar, you're going to be big enough that you can either outweigh them on the legal side or feel free to pay them something. So you just have to do a balance. Again, I would say that think about where you want your company to be in 12, 24, 36 months. And if your brand name, which typically it is going to be important, try and do a little bit of web searching on how you want your URLs to be, what you'd like to do as a trademark for your actual name. And filing a trademark is fairly simple, but that's something I would say to do. Of course, the whole IP story, that's a different, our business early on, our play wasn't necessarily IP based. Now we're, I guess, 3 years into it. Now we're starting to do some patents. Exactly, patents, sorry. But again, I think early on, think trademark. At least think, what's my name? How do I want this to look? Think trademark.
Yeah, so just definitions. Trademark is about your name, and patents is about the technology that you're building.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I looked into trademarks as well, but, I was like, wow, this is so expensive, like, it's crazy. So I just decided to go without trademarking, and it's hard when you're starting a business, everything costs so much, or it can cost so much, and it can also cost very little if you're also too smart about it. And also, I think in terms of IP, like we didn't IP anything either. We didn't need it unless it's really a groundbreaking, disruptive technology. I think you can just go ahead and build your stuff and not be afraid of just doing it.
Yeah, I think when we think about IP patenting, that's where it really pricey.
Yep.
And you really gotta know what you're doing because in software it's not as easy to patent today. There's so many patents.
Yeah.
And now when it comes to branding and your name, as you mentioned, you wanna do the search. Make sure your name is not Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah.
But it's not as pricey to do the trademarks. So you can, I know some founders that actually trademark their name themselves. It was a completely out of out of this world name, so no one, they didn't have problem trademarking it themselves. But if you feel like you really have a good name and you want to make sure that it's secured, maybe it's worth to spend some money on trademark in early days.
And one thing I'll say is that even if, again, we do not trademark early on. And you have a limited amount of funds, you have a lot to do. So I'm not necessarily saying you have to go trademark your name. I'm saying do the search just on your own, just to know what's out there. So again, you can kind of think of where do I want to be, what issues might I have down the line. It just helps you understand the things you might have to deal with.
And it's pretty easy to search, right?
Correct.
It's just to go on the web.
Yeah. And also one thing actually which is helpful and you can learn a lot without having to pay for it. You can, so what I did, for example, there is this company is actually a book, and they called Starters, and they have a trademark. So I contacted a law office, and they gave me a free consulting, like half an hour, so you can actually learn a lot. And they said that it's a very different category, so it should not be any issue. So I would have probably, if they didn't give me this information, I would have probably never picked it because I was a little bit nervous about
What's
it.
the name of this company that gave you this information?
Oh, I can't remember. It's a San Francisco-based company.
Okay, just the company for trademarks?
They do all sorts of things, but one of their focus is trademarking.
Okay, so free
Yeah.
consultation.
Yeah.
I would say if you're early on, don't even worry about trademarking or IP or anything because you still have to just see if your idea is worth pursuing in the first place. So you shouldn't be spending time on like IP and things of that nature. It actually came back to bite me in the case of LeanStack, but I think it's better to be reactive for these sort of things because they rarely ever come up. We got contacted by a company that owned not LeanStack, but another term we were using, and we had shown up on their radar just because of Hacker News. So we actually got contacted, but it was like it was an okay exchange. It wasn't like a cease and desist. So I would say just be reactive, but yeah, I mean do your search. Go to instantdomainsearch.com and make sure the domain's not taken. But if it's not, you're good.
How did they reach out to you? Email or a letter?
Yeah,
Email?
email, yeah.
Cool. All right. All right, so next question I think is about co-founders, to your question. And let's see. So did you look for a co-founder in your company? And if yes, how did you find him, her? Did you even need a co-founder?
Maybe we'll start from there since my co-founder looked for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start. So originally I was actually just treating it as a side project, so it wasn't like I need a co-founder. I was really just working with one of my buddies I'd gone to college with. And then as it sort of took form and was like, okay, there's going to be a company, it was more like, all right, is this a good fit? And for me, it ended up not being a good fit. So we didn't end up moving forward together, but it was sort of in that stage where it was like, all right, already launched at that point, and I was like, all right, let me just execute. Because co-founders, I've talked to a lot of people that have gone through it. Finding a co-founder is not something you do, right? It's something that sort of happens. I mean, you can be deliberate about going out to meet people, but it's sort of like you can't really say, I want to get married and go meet someone that is worth marrying or that you click with. So it's not as intentional as people make it seem, like go out and find a co-founder, like they're lined up. So my attitude was, and the advice I got was like, just execute and be open to working with people. If there are people that you click with, then work with them. And now I've been fortunate enough to find someone that I click with that is going to come on as co-founder and CTO. But I would say, execute on your idea as much as you can, and, things will come out of that. Because I never would have found my current co-founder if I hadn't been executing, right? So that, I would say you can't be deliberate, but I mean, if you know someone that you want to work with, I think that's one of the important things is, I learned early on from, other startups that I've known is like, you have to click with your co-founder very well, or there are going to be problems. And I'd always heard that, but I've seen it firsthand where if the co-founders don't click, then you could have a great product, you could have funding, but something is going to happen where you'll have issues. So it's an important thing that you can't really.
What is your criteria for clicking, for getting along with? And what do you look for? Yeah, just generally to add to that question.
I think one, you have to be able to sit in a room with them and just talk. I mean, you don't want to work with someone you don't want to be around, right? So just meeting someone and seeing whether or not you actually want to continue a conversation is important. And then there's the skills aspect. Like, do you have complementary skills, right? So I study product design. If I'm meeting another product designer, then that doesn't make sense. But, I think the personality is the main thing. How do they react in certain situations? So you just have to get to know people, and it's more important that you know how they react to feedback, and that you just spend time with people. You'll know whether or not it's a good fit just based on whether or not you want to talk to this person and hear their feedback and hang out with them. So I don't think you have to be best buddies. Like, people say you have to be in love with them, but I think that you just have to want to be around them because you are going to be around them for a long time.
Yeah. Sometimes best buddies can be a problem because there has to be some sort of a difference between friendship and business. Because you always have,
Sometimes they say like that is a better situation because then you won't split up because of the friendship. But I don't know. I've never experienced it. So.
One of my co-founders is my husband, so he's been supporting me from the very beginning, and but then we met Maxime, which is our CTO, and just sat in his office, told him about the idea, and he was really excited about it, and we clicked. We really liked each other, and spent a long time together. For the first time we met each other, then a little bit later we talked again, and he kind of approached us also with the idea that he would join as a co-founder, and that's how it all started. And yeah.
So you got married before or after?
Before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Question?
The two of you just mentioned that you brought in a CTO as a co-founder after you had the idea. I'm just curious if you don't mind divulging what percentage of the company you gave them is the first question as a co-founder, CTO as co-founder, and secondly, was that with pay or without pay?
For me, it was with pay in the beginning, but then he's now working for equity. But yeah, I mean the percentage.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably should not say how much his percentage is, but it's like you have to just weigh you have to weigh a few things, like how involved is this person going to be in the company? Is he just there purely for execution? Is he doing any of the marketing? Is he doing any of the day-to-day operations? Like, you'll quickly kind of find out, like.
Yeah, I won't get into specifics, but I think, if you're trying to make that decision for yourself, it's really just what stage are you at? Are you at the ground level where nothing has been done yet? Then, it probably makes sense to be at an equal stage. If you're further along, maybe it doesn't make as much sense. But it's really what you and the other person are comfortable with. If neither of you are comfortable with the split or salary, then it's not going to work. But I would say there's no sort of like silver bullet for that. I think you have to incentivize someone in a sense. Like, if you're very early on and you just want to co-found treat them as a co-founder, like go in, so they feel as though they're building this company with you, and that's the reality they are. But if they're not, and they're more like a first employee, then it's a different, it's a different situation. So
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to also add to that, there's no exact science. It's a very difficult thing. I mean, for us, what we initially, and this is not necessarily the way to do it, I'll just say that off the bat, but we initially divided up in thirds, right? The three of us, we just said we'll split evenly, but then we'll factor in, because initially we were self-funding the company. So we said we'll split it, and then we'll factor in how much each person's putting in, because we plan to hire employees. So that's how we did it. Looking back at it, I wouldn't have done it that way. It caused a little bit of issues down the line. We had some heated conversation and required us to sort of redistribute things after the fact. Because as Jonas is saying, it's really about what stage you are and what everyone's putting in terms of effort, time, and the impact to the overall business. The earlier you are, the more it probably makes sense closer to even, sort of. Unless they're really an employee and you're paying them and just giving them a large amount of equity as the first employee. So yeah, there's no exact science. I'll say the most important thing, if you're looking for a co-founder, again, I was the third co-founder. Right? My CEO came up with the idea, got the first co-founder, and then brought me in afterwards. And the biggest thing I would say is communication is just critical. You have to make sure that you can communicate, because there are going to be good times and bad times. And if you're not able to have difficult discussions, that's a challenge. Again, obviously, it's hard to have that, to gauge that early on, right? If you don't have a challenge, it's hard to gauge that. But just know that, try and get a sense, do you think this person will speak to you honestly about their honest opinion? So I think that's critical. We already talked about complementary skills, that's important. But I'll say the last thing is sort of the vision for where you would want the company to go. So even if one person, it's your company, you come up with it, some people these days want to build a company to get bought out in 3 to 5 years. And I don't personally see there's anything wrong with that. If that's where they want to be, and it's not where you want to be, you may not want to get in bed together, so to speak. So I would say really think about where you want the company to head. Have those conversations early on, honestly, about where they want the company to head. Because down the line, that can bite you in the butt if you're not really aligned. So that's my advice.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Quick question, are you investor founders now?
Yeah, that's actually the next
Yeah.
question.
I'm always ahead of you.
You're always
Yeah.
That's the next question. Okay. So given
Oh, there's a
where
quick question, I think.
alright.
So I guess beyond the clicking piece, once you start working together with your co-founders, I'm sure everyone has slightly different working styles. Like some people are very disciplined, they want things done yesterday, and some people are more laid back. And I'm sure there's differences. So how do you kind of cope with that? How did you, I guess, evolve such that you guys were able to, gel together on that?
Yeah, again, for us, we definitely have different styles within our company. I think two of us think more similar than the other person. But again, it came down to communication. Have the tough conversations up front. We kind of flailed around early on. Some people had different work ethics. But then we quickly said, look, let's map out where we want this company to head. Here are our goals. Here's what we want to be. And we still very challenging coming up with goals. But as you start laying it out up front, okay, here's where we need to be. Here's what's needed to get done. As long as the job's getting done, or what you need to get done is done, then the rest of the stuff, you can be a little bit more flexible. So for example, if I have to get something done by Friday and I choose to leave work early Monday through Wednesday, but then I stay super late on Thursday, get everything done, as long as it's done by the time we really need it to be done, that is what's most important. That being said, one of the other things that we tried to do very early on is start building that company culture. So some of us are more outgoing than others, but we actually made sure we had some time to do things together a little bit outside of just working. And it was little things. Now we have a ping pong table in the office, but back then it was just, let's go get coffee together, right? And that sort of building that camaraderie early on outside of just the day-to-day grind also helped bring up conversations. It was very interesting. A lot of our big company decisions and conversations happened when we're having coffee in the kitchen. Right, just instead of having a meeting, we're like, oh, let's just go get coffee. Let's walk to the kitchen. and all of a sudden have a real conversation that's critical to the business, but it sort of happened outside in our mind of the work environment, even though it's just the kitchen. So,
Yeah, sometimes you need to just get out of the square to think out of the box. All right, so about the funding. Given where your company is at today, what is your plan with funding? Oh, okay. All right.
So you mentioned that you started off with like kind of like an 8.5 really because of the change based on efforts and work.
correct.
But you said you wish you could have done it differently. How would you have done it?
No, I think we early on we put way too much emphasis on, oh, we're all putting money in, and what percentage money are people putting in? Because looking back at it, that's not really what drove the business impact as we grew the business. So again, I think I place more focus on what is the work that's going to be done, who's willing to shoulder certain burdens early on, take certain risks, and that's how I would do it. And also really think about long-term compensation. I mean, what you want this person to be as well invested in growing the business as you are. Someone having, let's just hypothetically say, if you're an early co-founder, someone had 70% and someone else had 30%. It actually changes what you think about should be done with the business. And that type of huge imbalance, unless they were more of a early employee co-founder, it's a slightly different story. But a huge imbalance early on, especially when the company's very early, can cause a lot of problems down the line.
You're referring to a huge imbalance in terms of the financing of it, or just the amount of effort?
The equity shares.
Equity share, okay.
Yeah. Again, when you're a little bit later, it's different. But very early on, if there's a huge imbalance, but yet the amount of work being done on each side is relatively even, it will cause problems. And it changes the way you think about how you want to grow the business as well. Definitely does.
I feel like in the early days, the initiator, the entrepreneur that actually started, whether it's, they have a co-founder or don't have a co-founder, this person always has to motivate the other team members. And probably a lot of times, this person also owns more equity. But it just has to be this keep motivation going on, because motivation goes away really fast in early startup days. All right, so to the funding question, given where your startup is at today, what are your plans about funding, and how did you go about it?
Oh, I'll start.
All right.
So we're actually in the process of raising a seed round, so just from angels. So been trying to stay away from VCs, just because they have a whole different set of criteria for what they look for, and angels, particularly for Lean Stag, people that have built SaaS companies and like these cloud tools, have been the ones that we've been able to reach out to and find them to come on board. So we're actually in the process of doing that now.
When you started your company, did you even think about, I want to raise funding and use this money to build, to hire someone, or you didn't even think about it? You just thought about, I want to execute and I'm going to do it myself with WordPress?
Well, the type of company Lean Stack is, it's called a database company. So it's similar to like Stack Overflow in a sense, or even Yelp, where it lends itself to the venture model, where you need to basically get a ton of people to use it before you start selling it. So I knew that from the beginning. It was in the back of my mind, but that's like a problem you think about later once you see that there's actually demand for what you're building. So it had always been in my mind. I knew what type of business it was. I knew that I wasn't going to like bootstrap this through the first couple of years. So it had been on my mind, but it was sort of like you don't worry about it until you have to, until you see like barriers to what you're trying to do. Like you see barriers to growth, and you start bringing in money, right? So that was sort of my attitude for everything. Like not even registering the company until much later when I knew I had to, So that's what I would say. Push it off as far as you can, and then just raise what you need. But I mean, they're different philosophies, so that was just my
Yeah, we've been bootstrapping, but I'm at this point where we need to start raise funds because we need to go faster, and we want to definitely implement certain milestones that we think are really important. And and so soon.
So you're
definitely-
planning on the angel money or VC institutional?
I'm open to both, but probably angel.
Yeah, whatever comes.
Yep.
So why don't you expand on that between angel and VC in terms of the, maybe when you come to you more, yeah.
Yeah,
The difference
so
and
when
some of
we
the.
say there are different rounds in funding.
Usually when you're referring to seed round, is the early funding before you get any outside investment. So if it's a seed round, this first round of funding, depends in which stage you raise it. If you raise it when you already launched your product and you have some data to show to your investors, institutional investors that are VCs are more likely to hear what you have to say and decide whether they want to invest or not. But in early days, sometimes, most of the time, you don't have your product out there yet, which means you don't have the data to show to institutional investors, VCs. In those cases, angel investors, and that's the difference, angel investors are just wealthy individuals. They're not institutional VCs, they're not accountable for their money to anyone else, and they're more likely to be willing to be interested in investing in your early day startup without seeing any data of how it works. Is there anything that can be very profitable in the future? So they pretty much, angel investors usually will invest in the entrepreneur, so there has to be trust with the angel investor.
Yeah, I think that was a great summary. I would say that things are changing in the investment community, but I think the early days of school of thought as an angel investor typically invest in you because they like you, and also the idea because it's exciting to them. It's more about the quote-unquote relationship and love of both you, the entrepreneur, and the idea that they're putting money in versus the same level of returns that a VC would want. So I would say early on, unfortunately, you need cash flow, you need funding to be able to grow a business, unless you're self-funding, which, again, you still need some kind of funds. But I would say if you can get an angel that you feel that is passionate and can add value beyond the money, that's probably the angel you should go with early on if that's the plan of action. Because there's just so many mistakes you can make. Someone that has done something, every business is different, so you also have to be a little bit aware about the types of advice people are giving. So I would say early money, it's always good when it comes with more than just the money, right? Whether it's helping you think through certain things, making intros to other potential investors or clients or users, or leveraging something that they've done in the past. That would be my advice there. For us at WePal, we're probably going to be doing a Series B in the next 12 months or so. As I said, when we first started our company, different names, slightly different products, we were planning on bootstrapping. So we put our money together, we built the business. We're close to running out of money. I think we learned the importance of money, especially because we had employees early on. And then we started having employees with families. So not being able to pay somebody is a big deal. So the second time around, we decided we wanted to fundraise from day one. And interestingly enough, we took a completely different approach. And again, it's just what we did. We knew we needed to fundraise. We knew that was super important. So we sort of focused on two things. One, get a product out, make sure people are using it and like it. We kind of knew that. Then we said, let's just see what proof points we need to get that funding in before we accelerate growth and spending. So
for your seed round, it sounds like you went straight to VCs?
So yeah, well, we kind of skipped the seed round because we joined 500 startups. We were, again, very early days, so I think it was the second batch of companies in 500 startups. So it was still very early on. 500 startups wasn't the beast it is today, but we joined 500 startups, and from there we met our investors. But I'll say prior to joining 500 startups, my co-founder and I, one of them, we were going to Silicon Valley. We spent way too much time, I'll be honest. Luckily, we had a third co-founder who was CTO, so he was building, and we were out meeting a lot of investors and building relationships. I don't really advise doing that the same way today, but the benefit for us is we built a very strong network early on, and we were able to get a lot of referrals to get to the right investor.
Yeah, when you joined 500 startups, which is an accelerator or an incubator, did you join by showing your product with having something prototype working?
Yeah, definitely. Again, we were probably, today Fire Technology Startups gets much earlier companies than we were in at the time. You know, we probably, since we'd been bootstrapping, they made a new product, we were a little bit more mature. So we did have traction and some pretty big clients early on. But I would say the interesting thing about what we did, again, it was all planned out. We said, none of us are Silicon Valley people. We're an atypical starting team, right? 2 Mexicans, 1 Nigerian American who's barely lived in the US. So we said, look, we need validation to be able to get VC funding. So we said, how can we come to Silicon Valley, get validation early on? Again, we were meeting with individual angels, but we thought, the accelerator route might be what works for us. Because A, we'll get in, B, we now have the accelerator title with us to help us get in and have the right conversations with VCs. Because we're meeting VCs and don't meet with everybody, I'll tell you that. VCs will meet everyone and will give you good feedback, but people just weren't making decisions. We thought there must be something wrong here, and was that we needed a little bit more validation. So it was all planned out. We said, okay, we're going 500 startups. We weren't going into the accelerator to help us grow the business. In our mind, we're purely entering into, again, it's the way we did it. We're purely entering the accelerator with the goal in mind to leverage that name and network to get funding. And that's what we did. So we just got a little bit of, most accelerators would take some equity and do a convertible note, meaning that they give you a small amount of money and they say, when you have outside VC funding, then that money we gave you will convert into whatever terms you get from the bigger company. So we did that, and then we got VC funding, Series A from right out of 500 startups.
And an accelerator like 500 startups, do they invest a little bit, some seed?
They do. Almost every accelerator will invest, I don't remember what they gave us, maybe 25K. So accelerators usually will give you anywhere from 5 to, on the high end, 50K seed money, quote unquote, to help get started. The other thing I would say about our fundraising story, and this is important, how we got into 500 startups was very unique. So it's really about being an entrepreneur, growing a business is all about networking and sales, right? You're selling to your customers, you're selling to investors, you're selling to other co-founders, right, to join your company, selling to employees to join your company. So you really have to have somebody early on, or yourself, take the reins of that sales job, right? And that's very important. So early on, for us getting into 500 startups, again, we were a little bit nervous. We had met some good mentors early on who were giving us advice as a company and happened to be mentors of 500 startups. So it's interesting enough, they said, look, we were in Silicon Valley visiting one of them. He said, today's demo day, 500 startups. I think you guys should just crash 500 startups, pitch to Dave McClure, and try and get into the next batch. And I'll tell you, my co-founder and I were like, what? It's in 2 hours. Don't you need a ticket? We don't know. Ooh, Dave McClure is scary. But we took his advice and said, look, just go do it. You have nothing to lose. I'm going to send Dave McClure an email saying, you should invest in them. They're a great company. And then I'm going to contact other people I know that you know and ask them to co-sign as well. So we literally did that. I mean, we were at his office, took a taxi. Again, we knew nothing really about Silicon Valley. Went in there and hard pitched Dave McClure. And we got into the next batch the next day. So again, my point there is just to say you have to be aggressive early on. One of our early clients was Adidas. This is actually before we joined 500 startups. How did we sign Adidas? Simple LinkedIn message. We went out and said, who are we going to get clients? I think we got Deloitte and Adidas very early on. We barely had a product. We just contacted people in the company through LinkedIn, had a great conversation with them, rolled out our product to them, and the early clients were on. So be aggressive. I mean, that's what I would say. Don't be afraid.
Did you talk to an executive member, like someone from the C-suite? How did you get Adidas and Deloitte?
No, I mean, we talked to the economic user who had to get us to the VP of talent acquisition, who's our buyer. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Let's try this out. We get a paid pilot, but we did a pilot. So let's try it out. It made sense. So again, we're very nervous of whether our product would perform, but you got to just take these risks because there's so many people trying to do things in life. If you're not going to put yourself out there, you're not going to get the rewards. It's just not.
So because Adidas, you offered them a pilot.
We offered them a pilot, exactly.
That might be the way to go.
Funny enough, the lady asked me early on, The thing that I always say is always be transparent, open and honest with clients, investors, co-founders, and that really helped us as a business very early on. So I remember the rep at Adidas, they were in Germany. I was in Mexico actually, talking to this guy, and the first question I asked is, well, it sounds like what you're doing is interesting, something we might want to try out, but will you be around next year? And, I didn't waver, I didn't say anything. I said, yes, we will be. Bottom line. I said, yes, we're a startup, but I'm telling you, trust me right now, we will be around. Right? And here we are many years later. But you have to have that conviction early on to really make change in your business.
Yeah, you gotta be confident, no matter what. Yeah. All right, so last question. Any hacks or cheaper ways that you know to get started or do something? Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. So go to LeanStack first, but we're actually launching a service that will just help you piece together different services and get out a product. So we actually had a post where the founder of this marketplace called Oomph, he talked about how he used MailChimp plus Wufoo plus Stripe to test out his idea early. So we're actually going to be offering a service that helps you do that in a much better way. So there's a lot of tools out there. I mean, you can just Google minimum viable product and you'll probably get a sense of what you should be using. But I would say when you think about the big successes, they all did something really hacky in the beginning, right? It was, I mean, Groupon was emails at first, right? I mean, it still is, but they didn't even have like a whole website. So everyone does something hacky, and I would say just aim for as little effort as possible, and just use the appropriate tools, right? Not everybody needs to start with Rails. Like, we didn't need to start with Rails and Heroku, but we did. So, yeah, I mean, just use what's appropriate, and there are a lot of resources out there, blogs and things, and again, LeanStack is going to be launching a service, so anyone that's looking for that, go ahead.
You mentioned MailChimp, Wufoo, and Stripe. With MailChimp, you send emails to marketing.
Oh, yeah. So what he did was he wanted to see if there was any demand in the first place, and he actually just connected people via email, right? You would submit what you want, and then via email, he would just connect with people rather than you connecting yourself. So it was like a manual process, and there are a lot of stories like this. But now there's even more tools out there, and sort of what we help you do is piece them together. We just talked about how you can create your mobile app using one code base, but you can have it on web, iOS, and Android, right? And you can do it in 30 minutes using sample apps. So there's a lot of things you can use out there. That was just one quick example. You can actually use a service called Firebase and Trigger.io, again, to create your mobile app. So you use Firebase for the back end that syncs the data, and then Trigger.io for the front end. And you can do it all in JavaScript and HTML. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And I mean, the problem we saw is how do you get to this? And that's sort of what we're hoping to solve.
Well, I think actually Jonas has the best hack. What do you say? Like approach that he told us that he created a blog or he blogged about something, and I really think it's the most important thing you have to do in the very beginning. Start having a conversation, and little tricks like create a Google alert for your competitors, and just listen to what people are talking about. Listen to what people need and want, but really, the single one mistake I did not do was to not start talking before. And I really think that's so important.
Why do you think that?
I'll just add something to that. I think being here in the Valley is particularly, it's like an unfair advantage for us in a sense. Like, if I wasn't here, LeanStack never would have happened in the first place, because that's where I met my first mentors who had actually started these developer services and helped me get to where I am now. And, being here, you just have that unfair advantage where everybody is based here, right, in San Francisco at least. So use that. You know, go to these meetups. I mean, you can meet. I met Drew Houston in Starbucks. Like, that's what you can do. So use that. Just get out there and, you know, like she said, just make sure you talk about your idea to as many people as possible, because chances are they've, one, probably heard of it, or two, I mean, they're not going to go and copy it. So, I mean, just talk to a lot of people, and being here, you have access to people that you wouldn't had you not.
And you mentioned something interesting, people that copy idea. So we always think, oh, we have this great idea, I can't tell anyone because someone will copy it, right? And there's such a, it's not as easy as it sounds. No one will copy your idea because it's about execution.
I think that's pretty.
Real quick, sorry, I missed your point. It was don't stop talking or not talk, or what were you trying to say?
So what I'm trying to say is that when you want to start testing your idea and also build an awareness around your company, because like you are gonna be surprised how much sales and marketing you should be doing for your product. So you'll get that from start blogging, get the word out, see if there's demand, and you'll also start getting insights. You know, it could help your product in certain ways.
So you say keep talking about it.
Keep talking about it.
Okay.
Build a conversation around your. It depends. Like maybe you don't want to say exactly what you're doing, but you want to start having a conversation around your industry. Also, it helps you establish credibility within your industry as well.
That's why I mentioned that was one of your mistakes, not to talk about it early.
I would say, okay, I love building product. I hate marketing, and I realized much later how much you have to do in terms of sales, and I think it really also starts helping you build that site and skill. And number two, it helps your distribution, because like if people start getting to know you and what you're up to, now a lot of people get curious as well. If you are just in the corner and nobody knows about you, then also nobody knows about your product.
Yeah, I think Dave McClure is actually the one who said everyone thinks that the problem is, you know, like building a product, but the number one problem that startups face is distribution. So if you're not talking about it, chances are no one's going to know about it. So you have to talk about it. I mean, I don't think today in 2013 people are still like, oh, I won't tell you my idea. I think that's pretty dead. But
yeah, it comes down to execution always. Also.
And again, just in case you're not hearing the message, talk about your product, again, in multiple ways. It's just very, very important. It can help. Someone might say there's someone else that does something similar, but you shouldn't get discouraged. Go look at that, see what they do well and what they don't do well, and it helps you kind of formulate your idea. So I'll say be engaged with people, tell people your idea, because it really does come down to execution. And I like the concept about building up the log, or at least the landing page early on, to get some kind of followership, to get some kind of interactions with people. That is also helpful. I mean, everyone, again, Jonas will probably be best to talk about specific tools. I think the thing that I would say is just people have proven now that throwing up a landing page with a little bit of content, right, to gauge interest, buttons that lead to quote-unquote nowhere, is a proven way to see if someone's willing to make a decision or is interested. Us having an enterprise product with global clients early on, we were very afraid to use this methodology. But then we decided, look, even big companies, we want to test out if they want certain features. So even till today, there's some aspects of things in our product that we won't really build, but we'll put a button in there. And again, we have an enterprise global product. We'll put a button in there that they click on it and it says, oh, this feature's coming soon. Thank you for showing your interest. If you want to give feedback, put the information here. And that really helps us really gauge what people want. Because every day, I mean, every week we have so much challenge reprioritizing what's going to come next in the product. So really being able to marry our intuition with what people are saying and actions they're doing with our product is very, very helpful.
Yeah, and then one thing, when you're building your product, also think about how you use social media to engage people. So like really we've been growing organically because of Facebook. Like 20% of our users, they post their workouts on Facebook. Their friends find about it. It's incredible how important it is.
Yeah, and just touching on the landing page aspect. When we first launched Lean, even before launching, the blog posts, when I saw there was a lot of traffic, I put up a landing page. I used LaunchRock, and that was really helpful in the sense that all I did was put a logo and then like one sentence: "We help developers find the best cloud services," and people signed up for that. So that was one of the things that helped me know early on that there was a demand for this, but they didn't even see the product. So I think landing pages are super useful. Stuff like LaunchRock is helpful.
And just to finalize the thought process, I'll give you an example of what we're doing today. 3 years in, multiple enterprise clients in. We are a SaaS company, but we don't have any self-service. Right? You can't just go on our website, sign up for the product to use. So now we're starting to think, well, we really need to create that funnel a little bit better, so we want to experiment with this. But our plan of action to explore self-service, credit card billing, right now we're doing wire transfers and checks, right? Crazy. But instead of building out the whole system, we're saying, look, we're going to design a great-looking front end that says, oh, self-service, sign up here. All it's going to do is send us an email. And we're manually going to go in the back end, create an account for that particular prospect, right? Send them the email for the account and get them signed up. Also with payments and credit cards, obviously you have to keep the data secure, but there's so many ways now to collect that information. EchoSign, DocuSign, they'll keep everything very secure. And your client or prospect can put in their credit card information, everything stored securely, but then you can actually manually process that after the fact. So again, I think one way, if you're a little bit nervous about how your clients or prospects or prospective users are going to see something, spend a little extra time on the front end to make it look good, but feel free to have human power on the back end to actually connect the dots. Right? You don't have to always build every connector yourself.
So is it advisable to get talent early on who's particularly good at marketing, especially if you don't have that skills in-house? And how much of a budget you should set aside for marketing? Because I know, I'm from product development and developer side, and we don't have that skills as particularly strong. And I've seen people struggle. They know how to build product, they know the tech side, they know all the tools, but they don't know how to get the word out there. So what's your advice for people who don't have that particular skill?
I'll say early on, everybody needs to be thinking in marketing mode, right? If you're sort of delegating that to one person, you're probably not going to be as successful as you could be. Everybody has to be thinking in terms of how do I get the word out to people, right? So I would say just develop that skill. And it's not like you need to learn, like learning how to code, right? You need to spend a lot of time. But marketing is just getting out there, like thinking about cool hacks, like, all right, let me post this blog post, let me put this on Twitter, or just being willing to go out and pitch. That's important at the early stage that everybody does that. I don't think you can really delegate that to one person. But it's probably a good idea to have someone who's done it before, but early on, all the best companies that I see these days, everyone is a marketer. Like, you talk to them and you don't know who you're talking to, right? They could be the marketer, they could be CTO or whatever, but I think everybody has to have that spirit in them where they're willing to pitch. Everybody needs to be willing to pitch and convince people that they should use your product or something,
And I completely agree with that. I'll say early, you can't afford the money early on. And there are enough basics out there that you can learn from blogs, other entrepreneurs, other co-founders, reports, works. So one of you in the co-founding team, even if you don't have that experience, take the energy, learn that, disseminate it amongst the team, and start from there. Today, this day and age, you should be able to do a lot with very, very little money expense. With all the tools and information that's out there, you need to learn that. Another reason is because when it does come time to maybe bring in someone from the outside to either join your team or consult for you on marketing, you need to know the basics. Because without you knowing the basics, you can't really evaluate, A, if they're going to do a good job, or B, if they are doing a decent job, because you're going to have no frame of reference. So again, I would say someone needs to take the onus on themselves at least to say, I'm going to spend a little bit of time researching what we can do here and there on the quote-unquote marketing sales side to support wherever you are in the business. A great one for sales, I learned a lot for SaaS sales, software as a service. Forentrepreneurs.com is a blog, FOR entrepreneurs.com, amazing for sales. I mean, it has a whole workflow. If you're a SaaS business selling to B2B, that will really help you out. HubSpot, their blog is great about content marketing. You can learn a lot from them. I'm sure there's tons of other resources that you guys can share, and us can share as well.
And one thing to add to that, if you're naturally not like marketing minded or a marketer, just put yourself in situations where you're going to be uncomfortable, right? Where you have to do these things, right? Like for me, I'm not really a speaker, but you know, I'm doing this because I want to get better. You know, so just put yourself in situations where you're not really comfortable, but you'll sort of get comfortable, you know, and just learn that way. Just force yourself to learn, I would say, is the best thing to do.
I think it's very hard for developers, right? Because a lot of developers and engineers are perfectionists. You want to know that I'm going to have the right approach. When it comes to sales and marketing, oftentimes there's no right approach. You really need to take off the right approach, do it all well, think through everything fully, sort of take that hat off and say experiment, let me try things. It's not always going to be perfect.
It's just what works.
It's just, you find out what works and you try and run with that. So again, if you're an engineer or developer, it's tough, but you need to take that leap.
So that's the question that you need to sort of develop, right? Because I think you're referring to the fact that if you're just the shy type, you just don't have that.
As a
with all the
co-founder,
tools available today, you need to sort of step out of that.
as a co-founder, you have to step out of that. As a co-founder of a company, everybody's selling always. Our CTO sells, CEO, I sell. It's just creating, and now every employee, we're even telling people, hey, you got to be able to speak about the organization. It's just very critical early on.
Yeah, people are going to be naturally better at it, some people, but everyone should have that pace.
You can learn it.
Yeah, just force yourself, right?
You're going to have to learn it. I mean, at some point you're going to have to, most likely, pitch to a VC or angel investor. Like, you're going to have to start forcing yourself.
I have a cool hack for social media that I discovered. You're probably all familiar with Google+. Not as many use it as Facebook today, but you will discover on Google+, Google communities. And if you just want to spread your word in early days, doing it for free, you can find those communities, Google+ communities related to your topic, whatever it is, and just post something related to the community there, and the community will discover you based on that. So say if it's an event for entrepreneurs today, I'll post to a community about entrepreneurship, telling them, well, in this case, it's easy. I'll tell them, hey, come to this event. But if it's something that I don't want to sound like I'm selling to them, I can just post interesting content about the topic of the community, and people will discover me that way. And actually, the way I'm doing marketing today is a lot to Google communities by posting good content there. And we have a lot of followers on Google Plus page, which is equivalent to the Facebook page. That's what I discovered. All right, so I asked all the questions before we wrap up and open for Q&A a little bit. Let's just mention again our products, our website, so people can go look it up and learn from it. So how do you spell it, Stu?
Leanstack.io, so leanstack.io. So we have all the tools that you would need to get your product off the ground, and then we actually walk you through the code that will help you piece it together. And we're actually launching a service in the next few weeks that will be more of a course and lesson style, but right now you can actually go and see the hacks that we have from other founders and people who've done it before. So go to LeanStack if you need help with that stuff, and we keep up to date so you don't have to.
And starters app So STARTERS app.com.
Okay. We're wepow.com. WEPOW.com. Again, we're in a video recruiting platform. We help medium to large enterprise companies size 500 employees and up streamline the front end of their candidate screening process.
Yeah.
Wepow.com.
Awesome. And my app is launching to iOS first next month. Meanwhile, you can go and sign up at the awesome landing page. The app will be called Finding, F-I-N-D-Y. Right now, the web URL is FINDY app.com. So go check it out. All right, so let's hear a round of applause to our speakers. Let's open for Q&A. We'll have some Q&A, but if people have some questions about the topics, please feel free. So, yes.
Comment and question. I think the idea about being afraid to talk to other people is kind of gone because everybody you talk to has their own thing they're working on, so I'm not going to be worrying about stealing your idea. My question back to the finance side was crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding in particular is coming. So have any of you considered that as a source for funding?
AngelList is a good resource. I've heard many stories of people raising entire rounds on AngelList. So I would say get on AngelList, and we're actually doing a portion of our round on AngelList as well. So that's probably the best one. I know there are other ones like Funders Club and WeFunder. There's a bunch of them out there, but I know AngelList is the one that has the most.
When you
people
say
on it.
equity crowdfunding is coming, what do you mean?
Well, right now the SEC is deciding on, how the rules, and they've passed the first round, and I think they passed the next round just yesterday. I can't remember. I don't know exactly what that is. But that's direct investing in companies as opposed to Kickstarter or, Indiegogo or something where you're basically prepaying for a product or, there's rewards involved. It's a very different. So this is actually owning equity in a company,
Without being an accredited investor.
Right.
Pretty much. Because today you can do it as an angel investor. But that sounds actually scary to me. I wouldn't want people to own my equity who, do not understand the industry. So.
Yeah, it's new and there are cautions, but,
Did you guys...
Again, we're way past that. Again, just our appetite, we probably wouldn't go down that path. Unless maybe we're building more of a consumery type product and we weren't really focused on the VC funding or down that path. But who knows? I mean, I said it's very new. People's appetite and comfort level will change over time. But again, I think right now it's still early enough that I probably wouldn't go for it. Part of my thinking, again, for us is we knew we wanted to go down the VC path, which comes with a lot of challenges as well. But our thought process is let's make that process easy. Now, I'm not going to there are a lot of roadblocks, and I'm not going to put up more roadblocks or potential issues for ourselves.
Yeah, I think it also depends a little bit what you're building. They're like, they're great. If you're building hardware, maybe you should think about kickstarting it. There's also another crowdfunding site called Kinky. I helped a company build a product that raised over $100,000 there. So depends a little bit, I think, what you're building.
Yeah, in those cases, it's crowdfunding today where you offer the product. He's talking about the crowdfunding where you can actually offer equity.
Yeah, I would not do it. I would not.
All right, more questions?
Maybe one question.
Okay.
For each of these, I think one of the biggest challenges, like where and how you're going to break even or make money at some point in time, right? So in your analysis, when you guys were looking at it, right, what was yours, like, is it like a 1 year I have to sort of push it out, and then hopefully I'll start seeing some returns? How did you go around that analysis, basically?
For Lean Stack, it matters the type of company you're building, right? Is it the type of company, or do you have the type of product you can charge for from day one? There are a lot of people that say everything should be charged for from day one. I don't really believe that. I think that it's very much appropriate. It has to be appropriate to your product. So for us, it was more, all right, what do we want to build? And then what type of company do we want to build, in a sense? And then figure out the business model, right? Is there a business model? That's the first thing you have to figure out. I think if you know how you're going to make money, and it's clearly, like, it's been done before and it's clear, then you don't have a lot to worry about. Like, when I'm talking to investors, it's not like, where the hell does the money come from? It's clear where the money comes from. Then you may not have to worry about that. But if you're not going for let me just get the whole space, and then you may have to charge, right? You have to figure out where that lies. I mean, a lot of people say be ramen profitable, where when you raise money, be in a position where you're actually profitable, so you can keep going, but to accelerate your growth, you want to get VC money. So it matters what you're building, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with him too, and we have not implemented monetization yet, but what I did speak with a couple of VCs in the very beginning before building, and just showed him the plan, and it's really good to get advice also and see if it's reasonable, and go from there.
Similar answer. I think it really depends on your business, consumer, B2B, business to enterprise. It really depends. But the thing that makes the most sense across the board is really honing in on the mechanics of your business, right? Things like cost to acquire a user, amount of time it's going to take to acquire them, how long they stick around, what your real business model will look like. Because you have to start thinking about that very, very early on. And if you have a good understanding of that, and as your product or service changes, you continue optimizing that, that's really going to be the foundation for your business. Because, again, right now, break-even is very important to us. It wasn't before. But understanding that, okay, we have X amount of clients, we're acquiring them like this. Oh, we see that over 12 months, clients who spent X now spend 3X. I mean, those kinds of metrics are great. We can fundraise just off really understanding how our business is growing, what those metrics look like, and where we're going to be. Now, if you're really a B2B company, SaaS B2B company, break-even and things like that are so important now. Again, we've recently fundraised or gone through that process, so you really do have to have sound metrics and be going towards that break-even path as a B2B company, going towards it. So I'll say we had a meeting very early on before we even got into 500 startups with Anne from Floodgate. There's seed venture capitalist firm. She said something great, and this is the way she broke it down. She said, if you're a B2B company, as an investor who's going to do seed investment, I want to see a model or metrics or you to clearly tell me that how you're going to go from, let's say, making $0 or $1 a month to $1,000 a month, right? And then I want to understand how you go from 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000 a month, 100,000 a month to $1 million a month. If you're going to be doing Series A, really most companies, VCs want you between that 10K and 100K a month type money for B2B companies. It's very tough now for SaaS B2B companies to fundraise if you're not really honed in on those metrics.
Yeah.
Again, there's a lot of information out there to help SaaS B2B companies.
Yeah, and B2C they say like 10 million is the new 1 million. So the bar is continually changing for some of the types of businesses. So.
All right, we're gonna take one last question.
Sure. When did you, particularly like how you went about coming up, did you identify a need and then work through how to resolve that need? Or was it that you were just like going through and then you're like, oh, this is something I can do with all these things that are coming up? I mean, what's the best way in kind of like developing your idea? Is it better like this way or the other way around? Or it doesn't really matter?
I would say there's probably no one answer, but I would advise everyone to think about it in the other perspective. So say, all right, you know, you have an idea, but don't communicate your solution to people. You take them, it's like they do it in the lean startup methodology where you talk to people and you say, like, have you ever experienced this problem? They say yes, then you say, all right, well, can you tell me about the last time you did it? And then they tell you about it and you say, all right, well, in a perfect world, how would you solve it? So you let them come up with the solution, and then your job is to really synthesize that and figure out what do they really need, right? But I would say start from the other side, and that's what we did at LeanStack, where, you know, I literally just talked to developers, didn't even tell them what I wanted it to look like. I just let them tell me what it should look like. And I think that's the best way to go about it in a sense. But I mean, sometimes if you just have the idea and you're really passionate about it and you know people will want it, you get it out there and you'll probably be wrong, but you can try it. You know?
Yeah, I agree. The one thing I could maybe add to this is when you're deciding whether you want to start a company, is ask yourself, is this the change you want to create? Because in the end, like if you believe in the purpose of what you're doing, you will never get tired of building it.
Ooh, that's hard to one up there. It's hard to follow. Again, yeah, I think I'll echo the sentiments and say that really you are trying to solve some type of need. I mean, even when you typically have an idea yourself, it usually comes from you thinking there's a need out there. And so like Jonas said, you want to make sure that you just verify that think more about solving the need early on than what the product might look like and try and marry the two together. So it's really think about solving problems, and that's usually what will help because people will use things that solve their problems.
Yeah, and the best type of problem to solve is one that you've actually had, right? That you've experienced and you're like, this is how I want to see it solved, right? So really thinking about that angle, like if you've never done health before and you're thinking about, oh, this is a cool health app, you know, it's going to be very difficult to come up with a good solution if you've never actually worked in health.
Well, I was saying, kind of a nebulous thing, but I think is very important early on, is learn how to tell stories. I think pitching to VCs, trying to get out of the co-founders, talking to customers, when you can frame things as a story that's digestible, it really goes a long way. Because you sort of set the scene, you get them excited about what that problem was, they see themselves in there, or they can relate to it, and then you sort of go through how the world has changed with your product or service solving that problem. Being a storyteller really, really helps. We do it all the time. I really push my sales team to do that when they're selling. Right, here's our product and features, but really, you should be telling stories about other clients who have used it like this and seen benefits. So think in sort of story format. It goes a long way to helping you explain what you're doing and getting other people engaged in what you're up to.
Oh, and lastly, I'll just say, I think what Chris has said is really important, which is you have to be passionate about what you're doing. I think you should experiment and play with ideas, but once you've got something that you really want to focus on, make sure that you're super passionate about that. Because for me, that's been the only thing that has gotten me here is that I'm super passionate about it, so that comes out. You know, I think Paul Graham, he actually had an essay recently where he said, the best thing you can do when trying to convince investors is just tell the truth. You know, if the truth is, I believe this company should exist, and here's exactly why, and here's how we're going to get to where we're going. If you actually believe that, then it's going to come out. You know, so you just have to believe in what you're doing, and if you don't, then it's going to be apparent to whoever you're talking to.
Yeah. So if you have a lot of ideas, execute on the one you're most passionate about.
Yeah.
That's what I did. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thank you, everyone, for